It is 2:47 in the morning on March 7th, 2026, and I have been sitting at this desk for 4 hours with 5 books open and my Bible marked in so many places the pages look like they are bleeding. I need to tell you what I found tonight. Not because I had a vision, not because someone gave me a word, because I went back to the original text, the Hebrew, the Greek, the Aramaic fragments, and what I found when I laid 5 prophetic books side by side stopped me cold. I mean, it literally stopped me. I pushed back from the desk and I just sat there in the dark for a few minutes because I did not know what to do with what I was looking at. 5 prophecies, 5 different writers, 5 different centuries, and they are all describing the same sequence, the same markers, the same window of time. Ezekiel described it, Daniel encoded it, Joel announced it, the revelation of John mapped it, and the ancient text of Enoch, quoted by the apostle Jude himself and found preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls, confirmed the pattern in language so specific it should not be possible. If you found this tonight, I do not think that was an accident. I think you were supposed to be here. I think something in you already knows that the hour is later than most people are willing to admit, and you came looking for someone who would actually open the book and show you what it says instead of just telling you what to feel. So that is what I am going to do tonight. I am going to open the book. I am going to show you the texts, and I am going to show you the moment, the exact moment, when 5 separate prophetic streams converge on a single sequence of events that the early church fathers believed was the final sign before everything changes. And there is one connection, one convergence point I found in the original Hebrew of Ezekiel that I'm going to hold until the end of this, because when I show it to you, I need you to have everything else in place first. I need you to see the full picture before I show you the piece that made me push back from the desk, so stay with me. Do not skip ahead. Every piece of what I'm about to show you builds toward that moment. Now, let me tell you what I was doing when this started. I was not looking for a prophecy timeline. I was doing a word study in Ezekiel chapter 38. I was looking at the Hebrew word for the phrase that gets translated as in the latter years. Most English translations render it that way, and you read it and you move on. But the Hebrew is different. The Hebrew is ba'acharit hashanim, and that phrase does not just mean in the future or in the latter years in a vague sense. The word acharit in Hebrew carries the meaning of the extreme end, the final edge, the last possible moment before something concludes. It is the same root used in Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 20 when God says, "I will see what their end will be." It is the same root used in Proverbs chapter 23 verse 18 when it says there is a future and your hope will not be cut off. So when Ezekiel uses Be'acharet Hashanim in chapter 38 verse 8, he is not saying in some distant future. He is saying at the extreme end of the years, at the final edge, and he is describing a specific sequence of events that will unfold in that window. That is the first thing that stopped me tonight. Because the English softens it, the English makes it feel general, the Hebrew makes it feel like a countdown. And here is what Ezekiel says will happen in that extreme final edge of the years. He says a great coalition will come against the land of Israel. He says they will come like a cloud covering the land. He says they will come from the far north. He says the mountains of Israel will shake. He says there will be a great earthquake. He says fire and brimstone will fall. And he says the nations will know, they will know that the God of Israel is the Lord. Now, I want you to hold that sequence in your mind, because I am going to show you something. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and this is the verse I want you to look at in your own Bible right now. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 says, "And at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands, watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book." The phrase "at that time" appears twice in that single verse. In the Hebrew, it is Ba'at Hahi, and it means at that specific appointed time, not a general era, a specific appointed moment. So Daniel is describing a moment when Michael, the archangel assigned to Israel, stands up, and that standing up coincides with a time of trouble unlike anything in human history. And then it says, "Your people shall be delivered." Now, I want you to notice something. Ezekiel describes a coalition coming against Israel at the extreme final edge of the years. Daniel describes a time of trouble unlike any other at a specific appointed moment, and both of them describe a divine intervention that follows. These are not 2 separate prophecies about 2 separate events. These are 2 witnesses describing the same sequence from 2 different angles, and that is the first convergence point I found tonight. But it gets more specific. And this is where I need you to stay with me, because what I am about to show you from Joel is the piece that most people skip over when they read this chapter, Joel chapter 2. Verse 30, and 31. God says, "And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord." Now, most people read that and they think, okay, that is apocalyptic language, that is symbolic. But I want to show you something in the Hebrew that changes how you read this. The word translated as before in that verse is the Hebrew word lifnei. And lifnei does not just mean before in a general sense. It means in the face of. It means immediately preceding. It means in the very presence of. It is the same word used in Genesis chapter 17, verse 1, when God appears to Abraham and says, "Walk before me and be blameless. Walk lifnei. Walk in my face. Walk in my immediate presence." So Joel is not saying these signs will happen sometime before the day of the Lord in a vague prophetic window. Joel is saying these signs will happen in the immediate face of the day of the Lord. They are the announcement. They are the herald. They are the thing that happens right before the door opens. And I need you to hear this, because the signs Joel describes, the blood moon, the darkened sun, the pillars of smoke, these are not metaphors in isolation. They are observable astronomical and atmospheric events, and they have a pattern. I want you to pause right here and tell me in the comments, did you know that the word lifnai carried that meaning? Because if this is new to you tonight, I need to know. I need to know who is hearing this for the first time, because what comes next builds directly on what you just understood about that word. Now, here is where the investigation deepened for me tonight, because I had Ezekiel open, I had Daniel open, I had Joel open, and I started asking a question that I think most people never ask. I started asking, is there a sequence here? Not just a collection of signs, a sequence, an order, a timeline. And that is when I turned to Revelation chapter 6, and I want to walk you through something that I think is going to change how you read the seal judgments. Most people read Revelation chapter 6 as a list, seal 1, seal 2, seal 3, and so on. But when you lay it alongside Ezekiel 38 and Daniel 12 and Joel 2, something happens. The list becomes a sequence, and the sequence has a beginning point. The first seal in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, describes a rider on a white horse who goes out conquering and to conquer. Now there has been enormous debate about who this rider is. Some say it is Christ. Some say it is the Antichrist. Some say it is a spirit of conquest. But I want to show you something that most commentaries do not emphasize. The Greek word for conquering in that verse is nikao, and nikao appears 24 times in the book of Revelation. And in every other instance where it describes a person or a figure, it is used of Christ or of believers who overcome. Every single other instance. So the first seal is not the beginning of judgment. The first seal is the beginning of a conquest. And the question is, whose conquest? And the answer the text gives, when you trace Nikao through the whole book, is that this is the beginning of the final movement of divine sovereignty over human history. And then the seals that follow, the red horse of conflict, the black horse of scarcity, the pale horse of death, these are not random disasters. They are the sequence. They are the Be'acharit Hashanim. They are the Bayat Hahi. They are the Lifnei. They are the extreme final edge, the specific appointed moment, the immediate face of the day of the Lord. And Ezekiel, Daniel, Joel, and Revelation are all describing the same sequence from 4 different vantage points. But there is a fifth witness, and this is the one that most people either dismiss or have never encountered. And I want to introduce it carefully because I want you to understand what it is and what it is not before I show you what it says. The Book of Enoch is not part of the biblical canon as recognized by most Protestant or Catholic traditions. I want to be clear about that. But it is an ancient Jewish text. It was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which means it was being read and preserved by the Jewish community in the centuries immediately surrounding the birth of Christ. And the Apostle Jude, writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, quotes it directly. Jude chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. Jude says, "And Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all." Jude quotes Enoch as a prophetic voice, and the early church fathers, men like Tertullian and Irenaeus, treated the book of Enoch as a significant historical and prophetic document, even while debating its canonical status. So when I tell you what Enoch says about the sequence of final events, I am not telling you to treat it as equal to Scripture. I am telling you that this ancient text, preserved for 2,000 years, quoted by an apostle, respected by the men who sat under the teaching of the apostles themselves, describes a sequence that aligns with what Ezekiel, Daniel, Joel, and Revelation all describe. And that alignment is what I want to show you next. The Book of Enoch, specifically the section known as the Book of Watchers, describes a sequence of events preceding the final judgment that follows a very specific pattern. It describes a period of increasing lawlessness among the nations. It describes the heavens giving signs. It describes a shaking of the foundations of the earth. And then it describes the arrival of the Holy One with his holy ones to execute judgment and establish righteousness. Now, that sequence, lawlessness increasing, heavenly signs appearing, the earth shaking, divine arrival with his holy ones, that is the same sequence Ezekiel describes in chapter 38. That is the same sequence Daniel describes in chapter 12. That is the same sequence Joel announces in chapter 2. And that is the same sequence Revelation maps in chapter 6 through chapter 19. 5 witnesses, 5 different centuries, 5 different literary contexts, one sequence. And here's what I want you to understand about why this matters tonight specifically, because I am not just showing you a theological pattern, I am showing you a timeline, and the timeline has markers, observable, verifiable, searchable markers that you can look up yourself. So let me walk you through the numbered sequence I found tonight. I told you at the beginning there are 5 convergence points. I showed you the first 2 in the opening, the Ezekiel word study on Be'acharit Hashanim and the Daniel appointment marker Ba'it Hahi. Now I want to show you convergence points 3, 4, and 5. And I want to show you how they build toward the one connection I am still holding back, the one I found in the original Hebrew of Ezekiel that made me push back from the desk. Convergence point 3, and this one comes from the alignment between Joel chapter 2 and Matthew chapter 24. Most people read Matthew 24 as a standalone prophecy. Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives. His disciples ask him, "What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus gives them a list: wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, famines, earthquakes in various places, persecution of believers, the love of many growing cold, the gospel preached to all nations, and then the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. Now, most people read that list and they see a list. But when you lay Matthew 24 alongside Joel chapter 2, something happens that I do not think is a coincidence. Joel chapter 2 verse 2 says, "A day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like the morning clouds spread over the mountains. A people come, great and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be any such after them, even for many successive generations." And Jesus in Matthew 24 verse 21 says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be." The language is almost identical. Joel says, "The like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be any such after them." Jesus says, "Such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be." This is not a coincidence of translation. This is Jesus quoting Joel. This is Jesus telling his disciples, "You want to know the sign? Go back to Joel. Joel already told you, and the sign Joel described is the same sign I am describing to you tonight." But here's the piece of Matthew 24 that most people rush past. Verse 32, the fig tree parable. Jesus says, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near." At the doors, the Greek word translated as near in that verse is aegis. And aegis does not mean approaching in a distant sense. It means at the threshold. It means standing at the door. It means the thing is so close, it is already touching the frame. And then Jesus says something that has been debated for 2,000 years. Verse 34, "Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place." Now, and I am not going to tell you I have the final answer on what generation means in that verse, but I want to show you something from the Greek that most English readers never see. The word translated as generation is genia, and genia in Greek can mean a biological generation of people. But it can also mean a race, a kind, a type of people. It can mean the generation that sees these signs, the people who are alive when the fig tree puts forth its leaves. And if that is the meaning, then Jesus is saying the people who are alive to see these signs begin, they will not all pass away before everything is fulfilled. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because that is not a distant prophecy. That is a present tense warning. Now, convergence point 4, and this is the one that brought the early church fathers into my study tonight, because I was sitting here with Ezekiel and Daniel and Joel and Matthew all open, and I kept thinking, did anyone in the early church see this convergence? Did anyone in the first 3 centuries of Christianity look at these texts together and say these are describing the same sequence? And the answer is yes. And the man who saw it most clearly was Irenaeus of Lyon. Now, I need to tell you who Irenaeus was before I show you what he wrote, because his authority is not just academic, his authority is apostolic. Irenaeus was the bishop of Lyon in the 2nd century. He was a student of Polycarp, and Polycarp was a direct disciple of the Apostle John, the same John who wrote the Gospel of John, the letters of John, and the book of Revelation. Polycarp sat under John's teaching. Irenaeus sat under Polycarp's teaching, that is, one generation removed from the apostle who received the revelation directly from Christ. So when Irenaeus writes about the end times, he is not speculating. He is transmitting what he received from a man who received it from the man who wrote the book. And here is what Irenaeus wrote in his work Against Heresies, Book 5, Chapter 30. He wrote, "And there is therefore in this beast, when he comes, a recapitulation made of all sorts of iniquity and of every deceit, in order that all apostate power, flowing into and being shut up in him, may be sent into the furnace of fire. Fittingly, therefore, shall his name possess the number 666, since he sums up in his own person all the commixture of wickedness which took place previous to the deluge." Now, most people read that and they focus on the number, but I want you to focus on something else. Irenaeus says this figure recapitulates, he sums up, all the iniquity that took place previous to the deluge, before the flood. And what was the condition before the flood? Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And what did Jesus say in Matthew 24, verse 37? "But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." Irenaeus, writing in the 2nd century, drawing on what he received from Polycarp, who received it from John, is connecting the final sequence to the days of Noah, and Jesus himself made the same connection. And the book of Enoch, which is essentially a detailed account of what happened in the days of Noah, describes the same sequence of lawlessness, heavenly signs, shaking, and divine arrival, 5 witnesses, all pointing to the same sequence, all using the same framework, the days of Noah as the template for the final days. And here is what that means practically. Because I do not want this to stay abstract, I want you to feel the weight of what these texts are saying together. The days of Noah were not characterized primarily by dramatic, supernatural events. They were characterized by normalcy, by people eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage, by people going about their lives as if nothing was coming, by people who had been warned, who had watched a man build an enormous structure in the middle of dry land for 100 years, and who still did not believe the rain was coming until the water was at their ankles. And Jesus says that is the template, that is the pattern, that is what the final days will look like from the inside. If what I just showed you from Irenaeus and from Matthew hit you the way it hit me when I first put these texts together, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, not for me. Because every like is the difference between this reaching someone who needs to see this tonight and it disappearing where nobody finds it. And what comes next in this investigation, the convergence I have been building toward since the opening, you need to be here for that. Now, Convergence Point 4 continues, because I want to show you something from the book of Enoch that I think is going to reframe how you read the Revelation passage about the catching away. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 and 17, Paul writes, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord." The Greek word translated as caught up in that verse is harpazo, and harpazo is a violent word. It means to seize, to snatch, to take by force. It is the same word used in John chapter 10, verse 12, when Jesus says the wolf snatches the sheep. It is the same word used in Acts chapter 8, verse 39, when the Spirit of the Lord caught Philip away after he baptized the Ethiopian official. This is not a gentle floating upward. This is a forceful, sudden, irresistible taking. This is harpazo. This is the catching away. And here is what the book of Enoch says in chapter 39. "And in those days a whirlwind carried me off from the earth and set me down at the end of the heavens. And there I saw another vision, the dwelling places of the holy ones and the resting places of the righteous. Here mine eyes saw their dwellings with his righteous angels, and their resting places with the holy ones." Now, I am not saying the book of Enoch is describing the rapture as a doctrinal statement. I am saying that this ancient Jewish text preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted by the Apostle Jude, describes a pattern of the righteous being taken up and placed in the presence of the Holy One before the final judgment falls. And that pattern aligns with what Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians 4 and what John describes in Revelation chapter 4, when John himself is suddenly caught up through an open door in heaven and sees the throne room before the sealed judgments begin. The pattern is consistent across 5 bodies of literature spanning more than 1,000 years of prophetic writing. The righteous are gathered, the judgment falls, the Holy One arrives with his holy ones. And here is the question I want you to sit with right now, not as a theological exercise, as a personal question. If the pattern is real, and I believe tonight that it is, then the question is not whether the sequence is coming. The question is which side of the sequence you are on when it arrives. Now, I told you there is a contrasting example I want to show you, because I think it is important to see this pattern not just in the text, but in the people who encountered the text and chose how to respond. There were 2 kinds of people in the days of Noah, and I am not talking about Noah and everyone else. I am talking about a more specific contrast, because the text of Genesis tells us that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and the text of Enoch tells us that Noah was warned in advance. He was told what was coming, he was given specific instructions, and he obeyed. But there was another man in that generation who also received a warning. His name was Methuselah, and Methuselah's name in Hebrew is a prophecy. The name Methuselah comes from 2 Hebrew roots, muth, which means death, and shalach, which means to send or to bring. His name means when he dies, it will be sent, or when he dies, it will come. And here is what the historical record shows. Methuselah died in the same year the flood came. His name was a living prophecy. Every year he was alive was a year of grace. Every year he breathed was a year the judgment was held back, and when he died, the rain began. Now, I am not telling you that to give you a date. I am telling you that to show you something about the character of God. The God of the Bible is a God who embeds warnings into the fabric of creation itself. He puts a prophecy in a man's name. He puts a countdown in a human lifespan. He puts a herald in the heavens. He puts a pattern in the text that 5 different prophets across 5 different centuries all describe in the same sequence. And the question is not whether the warning is there. The question is whether you are the kind of person who sees it and responds, or the kind of person who sees it and explains it away. Because there were people in Noah's day who saw the ark being built. They saw it every day, they walked past it, they talked about it, they probably had opinions about it, and they still were not ready when the door closed. I need you to hear that, because what comes next in this investigation, the final convergence point, the thing I found in the original Hebrew of Ezekiel that I have been holding back since the beginning of this, it is going to make the question of readiness feel very immediate, very personal, very now. Stay with me. I want to take you back to Ezekiel chapter 37 before I show you what I found in chapter 38, because I think most people make a mistake when they read these 2 chapters. They read them as separate prophecies. Chapter 37, the Valley of Dry Bones. Chapter 38, the Gog and Magog invasion. 2 different visions, 2 different subjects, but they are not separate, they are sequential. They are connected by a single Hebrew word that appears at the beginning of chapter 38, verse 1, and that word is the key to everything I am about to show you. The word is vayehi, and in Hebrew, vayehi is a narrative connector. It means, and it came to pass. It means, and then. It means what follows is the direct continuation of what just happened. It is the same word used in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, when God says, "Let there be light," and there was light. Vayehi, or, and there was light. The word signals immediate sequential fulfillment. So Ezekiel chapter 37 ends with the vision of the dry bones coming to life, the scattered house of Israel being gathered and restored, the 2 sticks of Judah and Israel being joined into one nation, and God saying, "I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will place them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore." And then immediately, vayehi, and it came to pass, chapter 38 begins. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him." Do you see what Ezekiel is doing? He is saying the restoration of Israel and the Gog and Magog invasion are not separated by centuries of peaceful existence. They are sequential. The restoration happens, and then vayehi, and then the coalition comes. And here is what stopped me cold tonight, because I have read Ezekiel 38 many times, I have heard it preached many times, but I had never looked carefully at verse 11, and verse 11 is the verse that made me push back from the desk. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 11, God is speaking about the Gog coalition, and he says, "You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates." Now, in English, that sounds like a description of a vulnerable, undefended nation. and most commentators read it that way. They say it describes Israel in a time of peace and security before the invasion. But the Hebrew word translated as unwalled in that verse is the word parazoth, and parazoth does not primarily mean without defensive walls. In ancient Hebrew, parazoth referred to open country settlements, villages that had expanded beyond their original walled boundaries, towns that had grown so large and so prosperous that they had spread out into the surrounding countryside without needing walls, because they were confident in their own strength and security. And the Hebrew word translated as safely in that verse is batach, and batach means confidence. It means a sense of security that comes from trust. It comes from the root that means to lean on, to rely on, to place your weight on something. So Ezekiel is not just describing a nation without physical walls. He is describing a nation that is dwelling in batach, in confident reliance, in a sense of security based on something they are trusting in. And the invasion comes precisely at the moment of that confident security. Now, I want you to hold that image. A people dwelling in confident reliance. A people who have expanded beyond their original boundaries. A people who feel secure. And then, Vayehi, and then, the coalition comes like a cloud covering the land. And here's the connection that made me push back from the desk, because I went from Ezekiel 38 verse 11 to Revelation chapter 3 verse 17. And I want you to read this verse slowly, Revelation chapter 3 verse 17. Because you say I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. That verse is addressed to the church of Laodicea. But the condition it describes is not just a first-century church condition. It is a spiritual condition. It is the condition of batash, without the right foundation. It is the condition of confident reliance placed in the wrong thing. And here's what I want you to see. Ezekiel describes a nation dwelling in batach, in confident security, right before the invasion comes, and Revelation describes a church dwelling in the same kind of false confidence, saying, I have need of nothing, right before the most urgent warning in the entire letter to the 7 churches. And then Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. The Greek word for door in that verse is thura, and thura appears again in Revelation chapter 4, verse 1. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. Do you see it? The door that Christ is knocking on in chapter 3 is the same door that stands open in chapter 4. The invitation to open the door in chapter 3 is the same invitation that results in the catching away in chapter 4, the harpazo, the taking up, the meeting him in the air. And the sequence is this: the church is in a condition of false batash, false confident security, saying, I have need of nothing. Christ stands at the door and knocks. The door opens. And then immediately the seal judgments begin in chapter 6. And Ezekiel says the invasion comes against a people dwelling in batach. And Daniel says the time of trouble, unlike any other, comes at the specific appointed moment, Bart Hahi. And Joel says the signs appear lifni, in the immediate face of the day of the Lord. And Revelation shows the door opening and the judgments beginning. 5 witnesses, 1 sequence, and the hinge point, the pivot on which the entire sequence turns, is the condition of batash, the condition of confident security, the condition of saying I have need of nothing while standing at the extreme final edge of the years. I need you to hear this, because this is not a warning for the world, this is a warning for the church, this is a warning for people who know the texts, who have heard the prophecies, who have sat in the services and sung the songs and read the verses, and who have somehow arrived at a place of comfortable confidence that they are fine, that they are ready, that they have need of nothing. And Christ is standing at the door, knocking. And the question is not whether you know he is there. The question is whether you have opened the door, not the door of intellectual agreement, not the door of religious participation, the door of genuine surrender, the door of saying, I have nothing, I am nothing, I need everything you have. Come in. Because the sequence that 5 prophets described across 5 centuries is not a sequence that waits for you to get ready. It moves, it unfolds. And the window of the door being open, the window of the invitation being extended, that window is not infinite. Now, I want to show you the final convergence, the 5th witness, the place where all 5 prophetic streams, Ezekiel, Daniel, Joel, Revelation, and Enoch, all point to the same specific element of the sequence. And this is the element that most prophecy teachers skip over because it is uncomfortable. because it does not fit neatly into a timeline chart, because it is not about geopolitics or astronomy or temple construction. It is about something internal, something that happens in the human heart before anything else in the sequence can be fulfilled. Go back to Joel chapter 2, but this time I want to start at verse 12, not verse 30, because verse 12 is the part of Joel 2 that most prophecy discussions skip entirely in their rush to get to the blood moon. Joel chapter 2, verse 12. Now therefore says the Lord, turn to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. So rend your heart, and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and of great kindness, and he relents from doing harm. The Hebrew word translated as turn in that verse is shav, and shav is the most important word in the entire prophetic vocabulary of the Hebrew Bible. It means to turn around, to reverse direction, to go back. It is the word for repentance in its most complete form, not feeling sorry, not acknowledging wrongdoing, turning around, changing direction, going back. And Joel places shav at the center of his prophecy, not at the end as an afterthought, not as a footnote after the blood moon, right in the middle, right between the description of the invading army and the description of the heavenly signs, right at the hinge point of the entire chapter. And then Joel says something extraordinary in verse 14. Who knows if he will turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? Who knows? That is not a statement of uncertainty about God's character. Joel just told us God is gracious and merciful and slow to anger. The who knows is a statement about the urgency of the moment. It is saying the window is open right now. Who knows how long it stays open? Turn now, shuv now, because the sequence is already in motion. And here's the fifth convergence, the book of Enoch, chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. Enoch addresses his words to the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation, not to the wicked, not to the godless, to the elect, to the righteous, to the people who know, to the people who have the texts, to the people who are watching. And his message to them is a blessing, not a condemnation, a blessing, because the elect who are living in that day, the people who have turned, who have done shav, who have opened the door, who have stopped dwelling in false batach and have placed their confidence in the right foundation, those people are not facing the sequence with fear. They are facing it with the blessing of the one who saw it coming from the beginning. 5 witnesses. Ezekiel says the sequence begins at the extreme final edge of the years among a people dwelling in false confident security. Daniel says it arrives at the specific appointed moment with Michael standing up and the people of God being delivered. Joel says the signs appear in the immediate face of the day of the Lord, and the call is to turn, to shav, right now while the window is open. Revelation shows the door open in heaven and the catching away happening before the judgments begin. And Enoch addresses his blessing to the elect who are living in that day, the ones who are ready, the ones who turned. And the question that all 5 of them are asking you tonight is the same question. Are you dwelling in false batach? Are you saying, I have need of nothing while the door is being knocked on? Or have you done shav? Have you turned? Have you opened the door? Tell me in the comments right now, which of these 5 convergence points hit you the hardest tonight? Was it the Ezekiel word study on batach? Was it the door connection between Revelation 3 and Revelation 4? Was it what Irenaeus wrote about the days of Noah? Was it Joel's shav placed right at the center of the prophecy? Or was it Enoch's blessing addressed specifically to the elect living in the day of tribulation? Tell me in the comments. Because the one that moved you most is probably the one God is using to speak to you right now. And what comes next, the specific preparation steps I want to walk you through, they build directly on whichever of these 5 points landed in you tonight. Stay with me, because we are almost at the place where this investigation becomes personal, where it stops being about what the texts say and starts being about what you do with what the texts say. And that is the most important part of everything I have shown you tonight. So here is where we land. Here is where 5 prophetic streams, 5 centuries of witnesses, 5 convergence points, all pointing to the same sequence. Here is where all of that becomes something you can actually do something with tonight, because I did not spend 4 hours at this desk so you could walk away with an interesting theological framework. I spent 4 hours at this desk because I believe with everything in me that the window Joel described, the window of shav, the window of turning, is open right now, and I do not know how long it stays open. Who knows, Joel said. Who knows? So I want to give you 5 specific preparation steps, and I want to anchor each one to a specific textual discovery from tonight, because I do not want these to feel like generic spiritual advice. I want you to feel the weight of the text behind each one. I want you to understand that these steps are not my suggestions. They are the response the prophets themselves prescribed for the people who would be living in this exact window. Preparation Step 1. Deal with your batach. Go back to Ezekiel 38, verse 11. The invasion comes against a people dwelling in batach, in false confident security. And go back to Revelation 3, verse 17. The church that receives the most urgent warning is the church that says, I have need of nothing. The common thread is misplaced confidence, confidence in wealth, confidence in comfort, confidence in the stability of the world as it currently exists, confidence that there is still plenty of time. And the preparation step is this: sit down tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, and ask yourself honestly where your batach is. What are you leaning on? What are you placing your weight on? What is the thing you are trusting to keep you secure that is not Christ himself? Because the sequence Ezekiel describes does not come against a people who are struggling and desperate and crying out. It comes against a people who feel fine, who feel secure, who are dwelling in open country settlements expanded beyond their original boundaries, confident in their own strength. And the first preparation step is to identify your false batach and surrender it, not manage it, not reduce it, surrender it, give it to him. Say, I have been leaning on this instead of you. I am done leaning on this. I am leaning on you now. That is step one. And it is the hardest one because it requires honesty. And honesty about where we have placed our confidence is uncomfortable, but it is the beginning of shove. It is the beginning of the turn. Preparation step 2. Do the shove that Joel prescribed. Joel chapter 2 verse 12 says, turn to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. And verse 13 says, rend your heart and not your garments. Now, I want to be careful here because I do not want you to hear this as a call to emotional performance. Joel is not saying, manufacture tears. Joel is not saying, put on a display of grief. The phrase rend your heart and not your garments is a direct contrast to the religious practice of tearing your clothing as a public demonstration of mourning. Joel is saying, do not do the external thing, do the internal thing. Do not perform the repentance, do the repentance. And the specific preparation step is this: before March ends, set aside intentional time for fasting and prayer that is specifically oriented toward this question. Not general spiritual maintenance, not your regular devotional routine. Specific, intentional time where you bring yourself before God and you say, search me, show me where I have drifted, show me where I have grown comfortable, show me where I have been saying, I have need of nothing when I actually need everything. The window is open. Joel said, who knows how long it stays open? Use the window. Preparation step 3. Learn to recognize the signs Joel described. Joel chapter 2, verse 30 and 31. Blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun turned to darkness and the moon into blood before Lifnei, in the immediate face of the day of the Lord. Now, I am not going to give you a specific date and tell you a blood moon on a specific night is the trigger. I am not going to do that because that is not what the text authorizes me to do. But I am going to tell you this: the pattern of heavenly signs that Joel describes has appeared at significant moments in history with remarkable consistency, and the preparation step is not to become a sign watcher in an obsessive way. The preparation step is to become a person who is paying attention. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16, verse 3, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. The Greek word for discern there is diakrino. It means to judge thoroughly, to evaluate carefully, to make a distinction. Jesus was not criticizing the Pharisees for being interested in weather patterns. He was criticizing them for applying careful discernment to natural phenomena and zero discernment to the spiritual and prophetic moment they were living in. The preparation step is to become a person who applies diakrino to the times, who reads the news through the lens of the prophetic texts, who looks at what is happening in Israel, in the nations, in the church, in the culture, and asks, where does this fit in the sequence? Not with anxiety, with the calm attentiveness of someone who knows the text and trusts the one who wrote it. Preparation step 4. Position yourself on the right side of the door. Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him and he with me. And Revelation chapter 4, verse 1. A door standing open in heaven. Come up here. The preparation step is this: make sure the door is open, not assumed open, not historically opened at some point in the past and never revisited. Actually open, right now, tonight. Because the connection I showed you between chapter 3 and chapter 4 is not just a theological observation, it is a sequence. The door that Christ knocks on in chapter 3 is the door that stands open in chapter 4. And the people who open the door in chapter 3 are the ones who go through the door in chapter 4. And I want to be honest with you about something. I think there are people watching this tonight who made a decision for Christ at some point in their past and have been coasting on that decision ever since, who have been dwelling in a kind of spiritual batach, a confident reliance on a past moment, without the ongoing, living, daily surrender that the door being open actually requires. And I am not saying your past decision was not real. I am saying that the door is not a one-time event. It is a posture. It is a daily opening. It is a daily saying, come in to every room, come into the places I have kept locked, come into the areas I have been managing on my own. Come in. That is the preparation step. Open the door, all of it, today. Preparation step 5. Receive the blessing Enoch described. Enoch chapter 1 verse 1. The words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous who will be living in the day of tribulation. This is the step that most people miss because most people who engage with end times prophecy end up in one of two places. Either they end up in fear, paralyzed by the weight of what is coming, or they end up in a kind of grim determination, white-knuckling their way through the signs and the warnings and the timelines. But Enoch does not address his words to the fearful or to the grimly determined. He addresses his words to the elect and righteous with a blessing. And the preparation step is to receive that blessing, to understand that if you have done shove, if you have dealt with your batach, if you have opened the door, if you are paying attention with diacrino, then you are not facing the sequence that 5 prophets described with dread. You are facing it with the blessing of the one who saw it coming from before the flood. You are facing it as someone who is on the right side of the door, as someone who will hear the trumpet, as someone who will be caught up, harpazo, seized, taken by force, to meet him in the air. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 18. Therefore comfort one another with these words. Paul does not say, therefore terrify one another with these words. He says comfort one another. The catching away, the harpazo, the meeting him in the air, that is not a threat. That is a promise. That is the blessing Enoch addressed to the elect who are living in this day. Receive it. Let it land. Let it be the thing that steadies you when the signs intensify and the sequence accelerates and the people around you who have been dwelling in false batach start to feel the ground shifting under their feet. You were warned. You were prepared. You opened the door. You are ready. Now, I want to pray with you, and I want to do it in a way that is not a formula, not a script, not a transaction. I want to do it as a surrender, because that is what all 5 of these prophets were calling for. Not a prayer that checks a box, a surrender that changes a direction. So, if you are willing, I want you to say this with me, out loud if you can, because there is something about speaking it that matters. There is something about the voice, about the breath, about the physical act of forming the words that makes it real in a way that thinking it does not. Say this, Lord, I am done dwelling in false security. I am done saying I have need of nothing when I need everything you have. I turn to you tonight, not with a performance, with my actual heart. Search me. Show me where I have drifted. Show me where the door has been closed. I am opening it now. Come in. Come into every room. Come into the places I have kept locked. I receive your mercy. I receive your grace. I receive the blessing you prepared for the ones who would be living in this day and would choose to turn. I am turning. I am yours. Come quickly. If you prayed that tonight, I want to know. Drop something in the comments. It does not have to be long. Just let me know you are here. Let me know you prayed it, because I have been sitting at this desk since before 3 in the morning, and I need to know that this reached someone. I need to know that the 4 hours and the 5 open books and the Hebrew word studies and the church father quotations and the original language work, I need to know it landed somewhere real. And listen, you already know who needs to see this. Their face came into your mind while I was reading that passage about the door, or while I was showing you the batach connection, or while I was reading what Irenaeus wrote about the days of Noah. Someone came to mind. Someone who is still dwelling in comfortable security. Someone who is still saying, I have need of nothing. Someone who has not opened the door. Send this to them tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Because what I showed you about the sequence is not something they should find out about after the fact. Be the person who wakes them up. Be the Methuselah in their life, the living warning, the one whose name means when he dies it will come. Except you are not dying. You are speaking. You are sending. You are saying, I found something tonight and I think you need to see it. That is the most important thing you can do with what you heard tonight. Not just receive it, pass it on. Now, it is coming up on 4 in the morning on March 7th, 2026. I have been at this desk for over 4 hours, and I want to tell you what I feel right now because I think it matters. I do not feel afraid. I felt afraid earlier tonight when I first saw the Batach connection and the door connection and the Vayahai connector between Ezekiel 37 and 38. I felt the weight of it. I felt the urgency of it. I pushed back from the desk and sat in the dark for a few minutes because I did not know what to do with what I was looking at. But right now, having walked through all 5 convergence points, having shown you the sequence, having prayed that prayer, I feel what I can only describe as the thing Enoch described: the blessing, the calm that comes from being on the right side of the door, the steadiness that comes from knowing the sequence is not a surprise. It was written down, it was preserved, it was transmitted through Irenaeus from Polycarp from John, it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was encoded in the Hebrew of Ezekiel and the Greek of Revelation and the Aramaic fragments of Daniel. God did not hide this. He wrote it down in 5 different places across 5 different centuries and preserved every single word of it so that you and I could sit here at 4 in the morning on March 7th, 2026 and read it together and understand it and turn and open the door and receive the blessing. That is not the action of a God who is trying to catch you off guard. That is the action of a God who is pursuing you, who has been pursuing you, who put this video in front of you tonight for a reason, who is standing at the door right now knocking, saying, I have been waiting for you. Open the door. Let me in. Let me show you what I prepared for the ones who turn. There is more to investigate. There is a connection I found in the Aramaic of Daniel chapter 9 that I have not shown you yet. There is something in the original Greek of Revelation chapter 12 that changes how you read the woman clothed with the sun, and there is a writing from Hippolytus of Rome, a student of Irenaeus, who mapped the entire sequence we discussed tonight onto a specific framework that the early church used to understand the timing of the catching away. That investigation is coming, and I need you to be here for it. So if you are not subscribed, subscribe right now, because what I am going to show you next builds directly on everything we covered tonight, and you need the foundation we laid tonight to understand what comes next. Until then, keep the door open, do the shove, deal with the batach, watch with diacrino, and receive the blessing. He is coming, and the sequence is already in motion.